employed by the government of Anguilla. Like I said on the last Monday show, we're not going to sit here and say that all are great employees, but for the most part, the majority of them are great employees. And I find it distasteful the recent attacks that have come upon them by flag waving members of the AUF party. It's unfair to them. So, Doc, I think it might be good to start with you, seeing that you was the Minister of Finance, the man who found that money in that first instance to get his ball rolling.
All right, but thank you very much. You know, it seems like we found a lot of money and somebody else is getting to spend it, which, it's kind of disheartening and frustrating. But no, if you think about it, the public servants, they work hard and they have not had a raise since 2008. And we know how the cost of living has increased since then. And right after they got the raise in 2008, then it was cut in 2009, then cut again in 2010. And then they were frozen after that, essentially, that they couldn't have progressions and they couldn't have increments. So if you think about, how dire things were in Anguilla between those lean years from 2008 till say 2024, 23, 24 is when we started to see some turnaround in Anguilla's economy. Remember, when we came in 2020, we had a $97.1 million deficit. When the AUM got in February of 2010, there was a 70 million deficit. So you can see what you fight, and just think about Anguilla's economy over those years. I remember on the first day when I got the lay of the land and what our financial situation was, I said to the governor at that time, we basically were skimming water, and most of the time we were underwater. And it seemed like that's the way it used to be. We then, in 2020, when we came in, found that there was already a bill for 5% cuts to the public servant salaries. And this is during COVID. And we said, no, that couldn't happen. That the civil servants were the ones who would, keeping the economy going during COVID, the only ones who were able to work essentially, because hospitality workers were at home. And therefore, to cut them another 5% would cause such economic scarring. It would be detrimental to Anguilla and its well-being. So we basically blocked that bill from going into effect. And then we decided when we could do better that we would reverse the cuts. So we reversed the cuts and paid the public servants back the monies that first we did the back pay, which ended up being almost $17 million in back pay we paid. And then the two cuts that had been done, we paid that back by January of 2024. And then we put $25 million in the budget for 25, expecting to get the compensation review completed and then to be able to pay public servants. Remember, we also paid public servants double salaries or these, let's call it ex gratia payments, which equal to double salaries for 2 years in a row. And so we always felt that the public servants were doing a job that was essential for the advancement of the country. In fact, for the country to survive and to progress, you had to have public servants doing the work, and they worked well with us. Now, I'm not gonna hesitate to say that most of the public servants did not support the Anguilla progressive movement. A lot of them you could see on social media that, bashed us, spoke ill of us before our term, during our term, and since our term. But we treat them all fairly. We basically felt didn't matter whether they supported blue, yellow, green, orange, pink, whatever color they supported. We felt that they had a job to do, and that we had to make sure to look out for them. And so we worked hard to get the compensation review and the consultations going, and also worked with in fact, you remember the consultants even met with us when we were part of the House, had meetings to discuss, what we think should be the parameters and should be some of the criteria for considering in the compensation review, such as that, those who had technical jobs that were not have been previously considered as part of the salary increases. These things we felt were necessary going forward. And so, I've been disappointed that, the report has not come in yet. I assume by now that it has, because I've heard that these, the report will be considered soon, and that in the next month, May of 2026, that the public servants should be paid based on the criteria recommended for increase in salaries, cost of living allowances, being paid for, what we call hazard pay, for if your job is a hazardous one, that you should be compensated if you're being at risk. And if you have a certain technical skill, that you should be compensated more because have a higher level job qualification expectation. So I am hoping that this is real, that it will happen next month. Keeping my fingers crossed. We do know that it is difficult for the public servants to maintain the quality of living, especially when the jobs and the compensation is fixed and the cost of living has gone up, the cost of food, the cost of electricity, the cost of being able to do business. All these things are going up, and on fixed salaries, it's difficult to make ends meet. And we do know that public servants don't only take care of their immediate families; they also take care of their neighbors and those around that rely on them, and they too have children that they have to pay to pay for going to school, and to provide the necessities in life. So I am really thinking that's important. The other thing that is important is that the public servant salaries becomes a barometer for how the private sector is compensated. And I think we can extrapolate from that report once it's available as to, we have the minimum wage. Thank Minister Hodge for that. And this passed, in January of 25, there was supposed to be consideration for, reviewing the minimum wage and coming up with, ways to amend that to get a livable wage. And then the private sector pension fund, so these are things I'm sure Minister Hodge will talk about, but it just tells you that it's important to have that comprehensive salary review for the public servants, because it has such extrapolation to other areas in Anguilla, that we then can get a fairer salaries for workers in all the different fields, and then extrapolate that to hospitality workers who within the next month or so will not be, the tourist season is essentially ending soon, and they will be in jeopardy of not having work for the next 4 or 5 months. So these are all considerations. And, I'm glad that you brought up the subject. I know public sector reform is important. It's being discussed. And there have been reports on how the public service can do better, can be more efficient and effective. There's ideas to digitalize some of the offices. I think these are all areas that will help Anguilla move into the 21st century. But we have to start with making it, and we incentivize our public servants to do the job that they are called to do, and we have to be there as elected representatives to stand in the gap with them.
Thank you, Dr. Webster. Mr. Hodge, I think it would be a good segue to you as the former Minister of Labor and the driving force behind Anguilla's first minimum wage. Share your views how you see this comprehensive review of the public servants' salaries.
Thank you, Merrick. Before I talk about my role as a former minister, I want to go back a couple of years to my role as a civil servant, because you know I've spent some 40 years as a public servant, quite a few of those as a senior public servant, head of department, principal assistant secretary, and indeed acting PS on many occasions. And in the last year or so before my retirement, I would have been seconded to the Department of Public Administration to spearhead a public reform exercise for the public service. And during that time, I would have worked closely with the Deputy Governor, Mr. Perrin Bradley, and the PS Public Ad, Mrs. Kathleen Rogers. So I want to say that public servants, I have worked closely among them for all those years. And I really have to commend them. It is disheartening that members of the public who are dissatisfied with the antics of the current ruling party they can't take out their frustrations on the party, but they choose to take it out on public servants, and that is regrettable. Because as a former public servant, I know the rigors under which we worked. And I'll be very frank and say that in my time spearheading that public sector reform program, there were a lot of dissatisfaction in the public service, a lot of nepotism, a lot of, civil servants were treated badly, they were discriminated against, they were, in some cases, denied promotion. So there was a lot of things going on in the public service that public servants were not very happy with. And so this is why we have to commend them for sometimes working under very, very adverse conditions. I know for a fact that if you go over at public administration, you will see that there were issues, performance issues, issues with conduct, issues with persons can't get along with the heads of departments. Those issues were stacked to the roof, And so I am very happy to hear that the Deputy Governor is moving on apace with the whole public sector reform program, and I hope that it will result in a better public service, more accountability, more transparency, where public servants can be given the tools and the resources to perform their duties, as well as work in atmosphere that they are not ill-treated, they are not mistreated, they are not discriminated against. So these are very important things that, civil servants are expected to perform at the best under sometimes very adverse conditions. So I left the public service, I retired, and I went as the elected member of the Anguilla Progressive Movement. And again, because I had a background in the public service, I saw firsthand the issues that a lot of public servants face. And one of the issues in particular were preschool teachers, And when preschool teachers were telling me that they were making something like $3 an hour as a preschool teacher. And this is why I feel so proud that under our administration, we were able to enact the first minimum wage in the history of Anguilla. I went back in the archives, I did all the research, and I realized that over the past 40 years or thereabouts, there were several attempts at a minimum wage and none got off the ground, you know? And under our administration, we were able to put the first minimum wage in place. You know, America, when you heard the cries of the workers, $2 an hour, $3 an hour, some workers having to work 2 and 3 and 4 jobs just trying to make ends meet. It was disheartening, you know? And when we put the first minimum wage in place, it was with the proviso that it was for a year, and we were going to come back after a year and review it. And again, this is why I'm so disheartened again to see that it's almost a year and months have gone since implementation of the minimum wage, and there has been no attempt being made to review that minimum wage. One of the things that we wanted to deal with would have been whether we were going to look at sectoral rates in the various sectors. So there was a lot of work to be done, and I'm disheartened by the apparent indifference to this sector. I see just the other day in Montserrat, they are looking at implementing and improving on their minimum wage. In Antigua, it's the same thing. Wherever you turn, the governments across the region are taking a very close look at the minimum wage, because when you see all what's happening with the global pandemic, the global issues now that are facing our countries, you know, I am seeing where it is so vitally important that they implement measures to protect their workers. And then again, the issue of pension. You know, again, Merrick, I'm so disheartened. We have heard the cries of the workers. I mean, some of them in tears. 30, 40 years, they go home with their last paycheck, you know. One lady told me she worked all her years having to climb flights of stairs every day with buckets and mops and those kinds of things. And she said when she retired, again, her knees were practically gone. And all she got to go on with was her last paycheck. You know, and we would have discussed this in detail last week. So again, it is very disheartening that when we put this pension committee in place, and the committee was doing very well. The committee had reached a stage where they were almost ready to announce their findings. And that committee was abruptly disbanded. Abruptly disbanded, you know? And again, where are we as a country when we are seeing all the geopolitical issues, the cost of living is going sky high? When you have to consider that these workers without a pension, because really and truly, Social Security is basically, it cannot be a filler for pension. Social Security forms a sort of a safety net in some respects, but that is also complemented by a pension, right? And when we see so many of our seniors now at the age when they are retiring in their golden years, when they should be retiring to the beach and relaxing and so forth, now they have to go back out to work when they're getting sick and they have to be flown out. Who takes up the slack when they can't do it? It has to be the government. So I was really disappointed that that whole emphasis on pension was so abruptly shelved, you know? And I must say the workers that have been speaking to me constantly, they are very disappointed because again, it was all about putting people first. Are we really putting people first when we are not looking at the issues facing our people? The issues with the minimum wage, the issues with pension, the issues with training our workers. I said last week, and I want to repeat again, where the government since 2015 has been taking out a percentage of work permit fees that was supposed to go towards a training mechanism for workers, because that is a real issue in our hospitality in sector in particular. because the complaint is we are giving so many work permits to bring in these expat managers. What's happening to our locals? And we are expecting that the hotels are going to train up our locals. A lot of them are doing it, but I think the government has to take a definite step. So when I learned, when I got into office, that they had this mechanism from 2015 taking out this 10%, and we would have added a 20% to that for the upper echelons of the workers. And that money was just going into the consolidated fund to pay expenses. It was not being diverted to the workers. You know, and all of these things have me really, really concerned, because this should be all about putting our people first. I'm going to shut up for now. I'm going to come back as we go. But those were my initial opening thoughts.
Yeah, and I can tell you're very, very passionate about this topic, Tahaj. You can actually feel the passion from you coming to the screen, as we talk about these matters, because I mean, some people can say I love you, when you're quoting, but the actual fact, yeah, but I ain't I love you, but I ain't treating you well, I ain't taking you out, I ain't never buy you nothing for your body. And this is what this administration is feeling like to me. They keep telling people, we putting people first, but people, so many people in the private sector would be glad for this opportunity for the pension. It's the same way so many people were happy for the minimum wage. So many people would have been glad for this opportunity to, after working 30, 40 years in the private sector, to be finally able to say, okay, here's the end. I can go home with something. And what did this administration do? Just disband it. And nowhere you've heard or seen any plans for them to even come up with something to replace it. So here we are again. The people of Anguilla are the losers in this. The same people that they keep quoting, so to speak, end up being the losers, big, big, big time. We went to lengths to make sure that our seniors are covered with Senior Shield, and they are going to lengths to make sure pull out the rug from under them as it relates to this. So again, the people of Anguilla are losers. Mr. Hughes, good evening. While we can just jump a little bit across because Dr. Webster and Mr. Hodge have really, really, went in hard on how they see this comprehensive package and our labor situation as it relates to the public service. But what I want to pick your brain for, because it occurred to me while we were on the show on Monday, you would have been part of, not an elected member, but a nominated member of the 2010 administration under the Honorable Hubert Hughes. So you would have had two go-arounds where you've had to help rescue the country after it was devastated by the AUF administration. You saw what you met in 2010, what you left in 2015. Then when you came back again in 2020, you saw again how the country's resources were just decimated. And they can't say COVID because I keep having to remind people, we are the administration that had to deal with COVID. They shut down in April and there was an election in June, so they didn't have to go no length of time. So if you're telling me all the money you saved up after bragging about such good tourism years was just a poof, then something is wrong. But what I want from you, Hayden, is to give us your views, how the similarities you're seeing, what would have happened after the 2015 election, and what you're seeing now after the 2025 election.
Thank you very much, Merrick. And good night to everyone, in particular radio and social media viewers. This is one place where the speaker cannot stop me from speaking and giving some historical context. And she said as much. Now, if you go back, right? First and foremost, since Abraham Lincoln was murdered by John Wilkes Booth, the Republican Party changed dramatically. And the Republican Party has been the same since then to this day. The difference is that Lyndon Johnson signed the Voting Rights Act in the 1960s and kind of transformed the parties, but they have been very consistent as a party. The Anguilla United Front, the precursor to the Anguilla National Alliance, has not changed since its inception. It's the same modus operandi. The same way they operated back in the 1980s, the early 1980s, is the same way they operate today. But you come really far in the future. But in 2000, when Victor Banks, as the Minister of Finance in the Anguilla United Front administration, came to office after the Anguilla Progressive Movement, APM, AUM, had left office in March of 2000, he said, and I quote, "The country's finances have been prudently managed. We will hit the ground running." By 2001, we were in dire fiscal streets. Fast forward to 2010, when we came to office, Anguilla was in significant economic decline. It was over 16% economic decline. There was no reserves. It had lots of outstanding bills. The overdraft facility was exhausted. The $20 million was exhausted. And government, along with Social Security, had come up with a scheme called ASIDCO to provide liquidity for National Bank of Angola, because the Anguilla United Front, by announcements, caused the collapse of the local banks. And here's why I say that. Osborne Fleming, who was the leader of the Anguilla United Front, he said to the people of Angola on public airways, while being the chairman of the Caribbean Commercial Bank, to go to the banks and borrow and build. And lots of people went out and borrowed and built. And we know the banks collapsed under the weight of over 70%, almost 70% non-performing loans, when Merrick, you and I know that the threshold for non-performing loans should be no more than 5%. So that tells you a lot. Now, so the Anguilla United Front have continuously made bad decisions for decades. And you would think that with a new leader, in particular, the first female premier of Anguilla, and a new set of ministers, even though you have hold-ons from before, they would make much better decisions. Instead of making decisions such as stopping the North Hill Road, stopping the government administration building, not moving forward with the Cannonball to Runabout Road and down to the Webster's Park, not moving forward with the government administration building, delaying the airport development, you would think that they would have made different decisions, and spending $16 million, $16 million in England and counting to buy a house. Absolutely ludicrous. Now, so I have no doubt that this government, it isn't, a lot of people are saying that it has lost its way, but I don't think it has lost its way. I think that this is the way that this government operates.
Mary,
And
if I could jump in there.
oh, sure.
As Minister of Home Affairs, you know, I had to contend with a situation down at Lands and Surveys. And as Premier Dr. Webster, you would have visited that site with me, and you saw for yourself the conditions of that building. That is a repository of all the important documents relating to land in Angola. As a matter of fact, nothing happens in Angola without land. Bank loans, you name it. And that place was literally bursting at the seams. The roof was lifting. It had been damaged during the hurricane, you know. And you will recall that I brought a proposal to Cabinet for a new building for Lands and Surveys. And of course, I had to give way to the fact that we were going into a new administration building, and I had to placate the staff, director and staff of Lands and Surveys, you know. And that is just one of the many departments across the public service that were affected. Radio Angola as well was similarly affected. Customs, all of those buildings were suffering with mold. So for the life of me, I can't understand why it is taking so long to get a new administration building underway. You know, the government is moving into racking up hundreds of thousands of dollars in rent when we could have been looking at completing a new and modern administration building, you know? And so I think it's a matter of mismatched priorities, because at the end of the day, we jump down the backs of our public servants. We're looking at better quality, more efficiency, more effectiveness. But if we're not giving them the tools to work, and let's be clear, when in the private sector, we have issues with mold or issues with conditions of work, we as a government, we start to get that sorted out. But we have to look within our own selves to make sure that we ourselves are living up to what we are expecting the private sector to do, And it's really unfortunate that civil servants have to be operating from home or from mold-infested conditions. And I think it's time that the new administration building really, really gets underway in a hurry.
Dr. Webster, I don't know if you want to jump in, if you have anything to add to this.
I think that it was the setup is well, so just keep moving on, and we'll fit in where we fit in,
But to continue on what Ken was saying, right? And I read this excerpt from the 2026 budget last month on the radio, and just to piggyback on what Ken was saying, I think it's fitting to read it again. And this was from the budget address by our Honorable Premier, Corey Richardson Hodge, which said, our public officers have shouldered enormous responsibility, often under difficult conditions. Many have increased since 2008 and only began to see restoration in 2024. They have walked in spaces that are cramped, that are uncomfortable, and other less than desirable conditions, yet they show up day after day to keep this island running. So Dr. Webster, to you, when you hear the leader, the Honorable Premier, make these statements, but on the flip end of it, turn around and basically ignore a building, because I mean, we know we have staff haven't been in office for almost 2 years because of the mold situation. We are going into renovating and renting buildings all over the island in excess, when we could have been very far ahead if the plans that APM had started would have been continued on. And one such is the administration building. But how does it strides you went through to get us in a position that our hard-working public servants could have a proper but then to hear this the new Honorable Premier admit that that these situations are cramped and uncomfortable, but on the back end totally ignored the staff by going to the England to get a building. How do you view this as a former premier, former Minister of Finance, and most importantly, an Anglian?
So, as you mentioned, so many of our public servants are working from home or elsewhere. We know during COVID that this became a reality of working from home, but it's not the same efficiency. It's not the same quality of work. It's not the same ability to collaborate with your co-workers to get the job done. I mean, we certainly know when we were in, you had to have cabinet meetings. We could have all met on the phone or but you don't get the same type of interaction, collaboration, except when you're in the same room, looking at the same issues and come up with the same ideas, getting the same passion, body language involved. And for public servants to be working from home for so long, it is disheartening. It's even frustrating to me, because we had $10 million in the budget 2025 to get started with the to 2 of 4 4-story administration buildings. And this would have housed all the government offices in one area. where you have the ability to have the connectivity. And if we want to digitalize, we would have been able to go towards that more efficiently because we'd have new buildings with modern technology. And now what we're doing, what the administration is doing, is they're retrofitting these buildings. This is almost like the building out there in Stony Ground that Engleg bought. You know, you're taking a building that's past its due date, due by date, and trying to bring it into the 21st century, which is impossible to do. And this is what's happening now with government offices. So how can we advance when we're going backward? And but on top of that, to say they reassessed and they reprioritized, and that the housing of public servants' officers was not in top priority, that to me is unconscionable. And then on top of that, to say, well, we would rather that we get a house in London, $16 million plus whatever the taxes are going to be, the maintenance costs are going to be, the staffing of it's going to be. What you're saying is basically, we don't really care about you public servants here. You take what you get. We are moving forward with getting a building so that when we go to London, we can, entertain dignitaries and whatever else. I don't know still what the reason is for this house in London. I would hope somebody would explain it to me. I can tell you that the Premier has tried to explain it, and she has failed and fallen on her face multiple times trying to explain why we need this house when there's so much need for this type of money in Anguilla itself. Think about that $16 million that you could have invested some of that in putting solar panels on the hospital so that when the Anglet goes down and the generator doesn't come right on, the backup generator, you would have had solar power that would cut the cost of providing healthcare services. Think about the over $1 million that's necessary to put solar panels on the new high school, Campus Q. These were all prepped for that. That money being available, instead of putting it in escrow to buy a house in London, those monies could have been utilized for that. Think about CCTV, that now it's almost 3 years since we had decided that we wanted to have island-wide closed-circuit TV, which would not only help to deter crime, but it would also help to solve crime. That still has not been gone up as yet. And you can't say that you don't have the money to do it. And so the question is, there's so many needs in Anguilla. Healthcare. We all know that we need a modern healthcare facility to provide services that the people of Anguilla need and deserve. And here we are wanting to spend this type of money when you can take that as seed money to get land prepared, to start the groundworks, to get the new track going, a track that is offered to us by, World Athletics. And, these are things that you would say should be priority. We all jump up and meet the athletes when they return from abroad at the airport or at the Blowing Point Ferry Terminal. And we thank the APM administration for the airport terminal and for the Blowing Point Ferry Terminal, because otherwise we'd be in a tent down in Blowing Point, and we'd be in the rickety leaking facility that was there called the Clayton J. Lloyd International Terminal. Thank us for the vision that we had to ensure that the 12 million pounds that the UK said we could have for economic resilience, that we put that into developing an airport that we can all be proud of and that can house this, the new airlines and the expanded airlines. And then, we would have gone ahead and expanded the runway, and that they've also found a way to stop that in its tracks, because their mantra before was you can't eat concrete, and it was all an airport budget. And so because they want to be different, they've now basically stopped the runway expansion because they'd feel that we would say that now they are using the AI money to expand the runway. So they thought that first that they would go out and borrow money or they'd get an investor to do it. I mean, the same things they tell us we don't want an investor and developer to go full transition to renewable energy. They want to go and use the same technique to, I mean, it's so hypocritical that it's almost laughable that that the people of Anguilla were fooled by this administration, the Anguilla United Front, by saying they're putting people first. They are not, there's nothing that they've done so far that they've put people first, because their signature legislation, which they're so proud of, where they dismantled the GST Act, and they have the goods tax and the general services tax, both of which have added cost to the businesses and to the people of Anguilla, where now there is no relief for the people of Anguilla and can't be done under the current structure of the goods tax and the general services tax. Because if the businesses cannot claim back the 9% or the 13% in operational costs for their security, their communications, their attorney's fees, etc., they're just basically passing it on to the people. So when food stuff, even though there's no tax on food, when you have to add your operational costs across the board, then food has to be hit. And it is. And everybody is saying it now. So when their cronies and the sycophants are out there on social media and on the radio and everywhere lauding this administration, they're just doing it superficially, because they realize that the cost of living has gone through the roof. Cost of electricity has gone through the roof. Government is now subsidizing it for the short period of 3 months, when we know that the effects of this, the increased cost of shipping, increased cost of fuel, increased cost of food, supply chain issues, is going to be rampant throughout this year and into 2027. So instead of giving people some confidence, some predictability, they limit it to 90 days. And when those 90 days are up, I'm sure they'll come back and say, well, we're running deficits now because the economy has slowed down and there's no surety that government can continue to subsidize and to give relief and to do stimulus packages. So we will be again going backward to what Minister Hughes said. Back in February of 2010, there was a negative 16.9, economic decline. And that's where we're at. And we continue to see that. So it would have been good to start the administration buildings. I'm like Mr. Hughes now. I went around to get back to where I am. Government projects, government infrastructure projects are a stimulus to any economy, because government can't propose a project unless it can be funded. So you know that the money is there. Think about the airport project that hired over 150 persons. The working population in Anguilla is about 6,000. So 150 persons out of 6,000 workers, that's over 2.5% of the working population that was working just at the airport. If you have another project like the four-story administration buildings going at the same time, you would hire another, 200 or so persons. And then the TVET Center, which again, they had paused on that when that was all, surveyed, proposed, architecture work done. They paused on that done in 25, when that should have started in 24, but for procurement issues, they didn't get that started until late in 25. So these are all projects, government funded projects that could have kept people working. And you know what people were doing while they were working on the government projects? They were rebuilding their homes. They were expanding their homes. They were building new homes, and they were renovating their homes that were damaged during Hurricane Irma. and they were doing things, starting new businesses that they could get going because they knew that they had a source of income. Now we have these issues um, where there is no predictability in the economy. The economy is in fast decline, and they're now bringing in. I see that they're bringing in consultants to talk to them about the infrastructure projects. That is so laughable to me that
More than laughable.
projects that were already budgeted for, that were designed, that were ready to go, and now you bring in a consultant group. I mean, I'm not in the house, so I don't have
Dr.
I don't
Webster,
have I don't have immunity on this show, but you can. I want to say what I wanted to say about why they are doing these things for their political affiliates, cronies, and the investors that got them
listen.
funding.
Let me tell you something, right? When I saw that BCQS, when I saw that they brought in BCQS to help manage the infrastructure projects, I said to myself, what an incompetent bunch. The Anguilla
Exactly.
United Front is totally incompetent. Where is Hammer and all of those talking about Anguillians and Anguillians' expertise today? Where are they? Where's Papa Junior? Where's all these people? Where's Fritz Smith? Where are all these people talking about it today?
Exactly.
They are nowhere to
Exactly.
be found. Where are their voices today? Because if they had an issue with anything that we have done, then they should have an issue today. No,
Yes,
we had more infrastructure projects than any government before. The
that's right.
Anguilla United Front under the Anguilla program brought in certain consultants, for example, for the high school and so forth, right? That made a mess of things. We know this, Dr. Webster, because we
Correct.
attended the meetings and
Didn't
realized that
we?
these people made a mess of things.
Exactly.
Now, on
Exactly.
our administration, we manage the things. We manage the ministries ourselves. We
Right.
manage the ministries ourselves. When I was at the Minister of Infrastructure, I had to deal with all of these projects, including the airport project, including the road projects, including the Lansing Bowl Cultural Center. I had
Right.
to be out there, even though some of these projects emanated from other ministries. As Minister of Infrastructure, I had to follow through and manage these projects. And we were able to do it and do it successfully, Dr. Webster. We were able to
There
get
we
a
go.
bypass done. We were able to
Right.
do the Valley Main Road. We were able to do these side roads, like the Christabel Road and the Spring Pass Road, and all of these side roads. We were able to do the Valley Main Road. We were able to do the airport road. We were able to do the airport development, the Lansing Bowl Cultural Center, finish all the Anguilla program projects, do works down in Santa Cruz to commission and decommission the
Correct.
old pier and commission the new pier, rehabilitate the Island Harbor pier, rehabilitate the Santa Cruz Janos pier. So much of these infrastructure projects we're able to do with no outside consultants, all
That's
in-house.
correct.
So
Yep.
how is it now that they need to have BCQS to help them manage infrastructure projects, Dr. Webster? I don't understand it for the life of me. This government is lost at sea. And I said before, the reason why this mega government in Angola is lost at sea, Dr. Webster, is because they're still operating from a beacon. Beacon
Yes.
we don't need beacons
You
anymore.
don't need them. Yes.
This government is
We got
lost,
GPS.
lost. And you know something that was quite interesting too? Because this BTQS thing with just unnerving to me. And it needs to be expanded on when we have our program on Monday, and maybe even we'll be able to get on In Your Face on Saturday and speak about it some more. Because one of the hosts on In Your Face, Harold Wan, is also a project manager contractor. So I would like to hear their views on it as well. But and then you have Vanya, who works FEMA and does project managing and so forth. So I would like to hear their views as well. But you know something that was unnerving as well? When we were at a house and they brought this so-called relief, this week relief to the house, the day when the speaker charged that I was speaking for more than 5 minutes, which wasn't true, which was a
Right.
falsehood. I was not
She,
speaking for
she,
more than
she
5 minutes.
revised that. She revised that in her official statement.
Yeah, but on the day in question, I was not speaking for 4 to 5 minutes, right?
No, that's
I
correct.
I spoke for the least amount of time up to that time when I was speaking. And also, she gave latitude to Shelia Rogers Webster to respond to you, but
Right.
wouldn't give me latitude, any type of latitude to respond to Shelia Rogers Webster and Cora Richardson Hodge, who said certain things who needed to be clarified. And then
That's
she
right.
took snippets. But anyway, that's going to be addressed at a later time. But one of the things that Cora Richardson Hart said, and I don't know if people remember, is she said that all the revenue heads are not performing as well as tourism and
Exactly.
.ai. But
Correct.
tell me, if tourism is at record levels, Dr. Webster, .ai is overperforming based on the budget and so forth, then why is it that customs underperforming? And it goes back to what you said earlier about GST and the lack of report and so forth, and the vendors now don't have to provide a proper invoices. That's one of the reasons. And when I heard that, I said, you know what? KL is in trouble. They're setting up the stage to get rid of KL. And if you don't believe me, Dr. Webster, if you don't believe me, I call KL Kana and I say, hey, your days are numbered as control of customs. He said,
Yeah.
no, man, I can't see that. I said, I listened in the house
Yes.
today and I read through the tea leaves, and your days are numbered as control of customs. And yesterday, we heard breaking
Right.
down as celebration, no longer control of customs, and he will be gone by this month as control of customs. No, I say that. The same station that had that breaking news. Imagine if APM was in office, what would have been said today and yesterday? Just imagine if APM was in office, what they would
Right.
have been saying about KL's transfer from move from control of customs. Because I want to say this too. During this last election campaign, I recall United Front operatives saying on the day of election and the day before election, when you go to the polls, South Valley, remember Travis Carty.
Right.
Remember Travis Carty. And the record will show that when we came to office, Travis Carty and the government of Anguilla, governor's office, was in dispute. And
Right.
he was not in office at the time. When we
Right.
came to office in 2020, was not.
Correct.
Right? And
Right.
you remember there was a meeting, and I said, "Oh, Travis is not in office, and he's not come back as customs." When I was told that, I said, "What did I say? Send him down to me. Send him down by me."
You
Right?
did. You did. Yes.
I said, "I
That's correct.
love Travis. Send him down by me." And they said, based on the grade, it has to be a lateral move. Right? And I said,
Right.
"Well, I don't know anything about these things, but if there's a lateral move in my coup, send him down by me." And guess what? When he came, before he even came into office, he came into office to try to get a grasp of what the job was about. And I said to him, and he can verify this to be a fact because I'm calling his name publicly on radio. I said, "The stone that the builder refuse shall be the head cornerstone." And he
That's
said,
right.
"What do you mean?" I said, "Watch, you'll see." And by the time we left office, what was Travis? He was the acting permanent secretary in the
That's
Ministry
right.
of Infrastructure and Tourism. And he
Correct.
served as the
And,
acting permanent
and
secretary for quite a prolonged period of time.
he
And
did
now
a
he's a
great job.
principal. Now he's a
And
principal assistant secretary in the Ministry of Infrastructure. He did a great job. So when
did a
you
great
hear the
job
United
for us.
Front
Yeah.
operatives talking about remember Travis, we didn't do anything negative to Travis. We
Correct.
elevated.
That's
We
right.
elevated, regardless of political persuasion. We elevated.
Yeah.
These are the
That's right.
facts, and this is why as the speaker said, we have other mediums in order to voice our concerns and so forth. We're going to use those other mediums. And this is why here on our show, we can bring the facts to the people, bring the historical context to the people, and let the people know the facts and nothing but the facts.
That's correct.
Thank you, Hayden. Boy, I'm getting passion tonight. I am feeling so much passion from you guys tonight. But I want Mr. Hart, you can jump in on this. While Hayden was speaking about bringing in consultants and that sort of thing, well, consultants to help with stuff that we did that was normal. Do you view this as a disrespect, another disrespect, not just say disrespect, another disrespect, because we've already listed the number of disrespects that this administration is showing towards the public service. Do you view this as another disrespect to the public service, especially in a department like Maiku, where we know we have guys who specialize, who've gone off to train, some of them at the expense of the government of Anguilla, and we've seen the work that they can do, that we've experienced the work that they can do. Do you view this as another level of disrespect from this administration, from this AUF administration?
Definitely, I view it as gross disrespect. Because when you look across the public service, you will realize the number of highly qualified public servants that we have. And you'd realize when you look at all the recent graduations from the University Center, from the Anguilla Community College, so many of our public servants are availing themselves of tertiary opportunities to elevate themselves. So we have a cadre of highly qualified public servants. And to me, we need to focus on ensuring that our people are elevated to the positions, the highest positions in the public service. And the local misnomer is that we are seeing white faces creeping into our public service. And that's a cause for concern. Because at the end of
British faces.
pardon? British faces.
British technical people, it's a real colonization. You know how we had to fight back against the recolonization of Anguilla, because even as it relates to Attorney General, Dr. Webster and us, we said, any Attorney General coming to Anguilla must emanate from the Caribbean. And for months and months and months, they held out until we left office so they can have a friendly government who will do their bidding come to office. And we brought in a British Attorney General. Now, I'm not saying anything about qualifications because I don't know the lady from Adam. But the reality is that we wanted a Caribbean brother or sister to be the Attorney General of Angola. And hopefully we'll get to the stage in not too distant future where we elect our Attorney General rather than have the British government select our Attorney General. Because never in the history of Angola have we had a local Attorney General. Now, the reality is that we have the power to pay the Attorney General, but we don't have the power to select who the Attorney General is. The Attorney General is selected by the governor. Every time, from the very outset of Angola, and before we had a governor, we had a commissioner. We've had foreign Attorney Generals. Now, there are certain persons who say, well, we had Scipio. But Scipio came in as a Caribbean Attorney General, and he became an Anguillan thereafter. But we have never had a local Attorney General in the history of this country. And I can't understand for the life of me how we have regressed and continue to regress under this administration in terms of our human resource potential. And no, yes, I like the Commissioner of Police Clark. I like him a lot. You know, I think he's a decent guy. But I have seen that we have gone from successive local commissioners of police, from Mitchell to Perot to Keithley Benjamin to Mr. Richardson before him, and to Mr. Payne and all of those commissioners of police. And now, over the last 6-7 years at least, we have not seen a local commissioner of police. And I don't know when we will ever see a local commissioner of police again. You know what I mean? Because I think the stage is being set for all of these departments, including customs, to be run by British technocrats. Because it wouldn't be unprecedented, you know, because in the 1990s, a lot of British technocrats, before Hubert Hughes came to office, managed a lot of these departments. I don't know if you remember, Ken. You should remember that.
Yeah, Ken.
But you know, also
again,
before you go on there, Minister, you know, we're talking about the AUF bringing in consultants for the infrastructure projects. You know what really is stuck in my craw is they brought in a consultant to look at the Blowing Point sports facility that was built as a community project so that the young men and women in the Blowing Point community and surroundings would have a place where they could play basketball. And then they had a building that could serve as a community center. They brought in a consultant to look at that facility, and then I heard that it was to be demolished. You know, the Island Harbor basketball facility, where there now would have been a steel frame building with a roof and bathrooms and basically a place where the people of Island Harbor and the rest of Anguilla, because that basketball court serves for sporting events, it serves for other events, it serves for national tournaments. It would have had a steel frame building with all the amenities to be a facility that our young people could work in. And the minister, the current minister, went to the site on April 7 of 2025 and shut it down. And it's been over a year now that that facility has not been built. And it could have served the purpose that it would have been built for, that was, donated by someone with a friend of Anguilla, someone who came to visit Anguilla to bring his employees for the annual retreat, and saw the need and donated to have it done. Just think about it's showing the incompetence because they didn't want anything in the districts, the North Hill Road, the Blowing Point facility, the Island Harbor basketball. They didn't want anything in the districts that they didn't win the election in. They decided, and a lot of them got votes in those districts. I mean, if you think about it, some of them got a lot of their votes in District 1 and District 6 and even in District 5. So they are hurting the same people that voted for them, that they rely on to vote for them again. But because they're so incompetent and they're proving it, they now have to bring in consultants for the projects that they have stopped or demolished or they don't want to see happen. They want to put fingers on it. We don't mind. They can say all the projects that AUF did them as long as they get done. You don't have to say that APM was involved at all or that we had budgeted for them and proposed them, but do them, because these are all needs that the people of Anguilla need. And I've said that we're going into 59 years since the Anguilla Revolution of 1967. And what do we have to show for that? Basically, only the things, that have limped along. But in the 5 years of the APM administration, the projects that are there as standing symbols of what vision can bring. Now, the AUF has boasted that they don't need vision. And it's showing that they don't have any vision. And this is the concerns that I have as a former representative, a former government person, but now just as a representative elected for District 1. It just pains me to see what was possible and what is happening, which is nothing is happening. And anything that is happening is because it was already started and therefore they couldn't just turn off the switch on it, even though they tried to do that to the Patience Gums Road, which could have been done by now, but they decided to shut it down because they didn't think that we were at a point where we advanced enough to have sidewalks. Well, it's no wonder then that they don't think that they haven't brought legislation to help us to get the seat belts mandated and child seats mandated. They put it on the list, but they basically have made no strides to ensure that this. And we know that Minister Hughes had all of that teed up and ready to go.
Well advanced, Dr. Webster.
Yes.
Those are well advanced. The jet ski legislation was well advanced. Those things are well advanced and can go to the House in a matter of days. Dr. Webster, I'm not a host of the program, but I need to touch on this. The fact that when Identity Digital won the contract to promote and manage the .ai.
Hayden, I just want to stick a pin in it because that's one of the questions I have going forward.
Okay.
I want to get back to my point.
Mr. Hodge, yes, I was just about to say that Mr. Hodge was making a point. We cut him across, so I'm going to leave him go. So Hayden, just hold your thoughts on Identity Digital because I have that as one of the questions to come up. Continue,
I want to
Mr.
get
Hodge.
back to this whole issue of public sector reform and manpower and succession planning. Because I want to make the point that during the time that I was a civil servant in public administration dealing with public sector reform, the government of the day, which was the Anguilla United Front, did not put a dime into that public sector reform program, not a single dime. And we had to improvise and find all sorts of innovative ways to try to get that program going. And you'll recall, gentlemen, that even in my time as minister, I spoke on several occasions, even in the House of Assembly and on media, about the whole importance of public sector reform. But I want to make the point that the deputy governor was on radio over the weekend, speaking in detail about public sector reform and what they are doing in terms of moving the public sector, public service forward. And I want to challenge him as well for the rest of his tenure. One of the things that he should ensure that the civil servants are equipped with the skills and the training to elevate themselves to these positions when they come available. Because we need, as a nation, to ensure that we elevate our people to the various highest levels. And I am confident, looking at the skill sets even within my ministry at the time, and even across the wider public service, that there are public servants that are up and willing and capable of the tasks in any department across Angola Public Service. And I think it will be a legacy for all of us, and the deputy governor in particular, when he leaves the position of the deputy governor, that he can leave a legacy that would say he ensured that he prepared public servants to elevate themselves to the highest positions across the entire sector. And that is something I think he needs to be conscious of as he goes through the rest of his tenure and the rest of his program, that we prepare our public servants to take up the mantle of leadership across the highest levels. He mentioned that a number of permanent secretaries are going home over the next couple of years. And so therefore it is important that we begin to look now, if we haven't already done so, to see what is available, what is required, and undertake the necessary training and development that we can see our people continue to be elevated to these positions.
Thank you, Mr. Hodge. Hayden, I know you're anxious. You obviously were anxious to jump into this one. And like I said, Monday, it seemed like, we're so in tune now. It's getting a little scary. But in one of the group chats that I am in, a clip was shared where the launch of I think there was a AI conference, I think from the 14th to the 16th. And some of the speakers who were shared in that clip, the Honorable Minister for Tourism and the Honorable Minister for Maiku, and the way they were talking about identity digital and what it has accomplished and the great things they are doing. The people in the group chat was like, are these this is a new company that took over since you guys? Because they could not believe, because they too can remember when we were dragged across the coals for opening up the bidding, actually, and and identity digital won a fair process, as compared to what we were getting before. Because I don't think it's an accident. I don't think it was just the timing of it that we are seeing these record numbers come in now at this time, as opposed to what was happening before. But I know you have a lot of thoughts on this, Hayden, so I'm going to leave you go through. Feel
Merrick,
free.
I have a question to ask you, right? Tell me one project that we did that Angola United Front supported. Did they support the bypass? No. Did they support the Valley Main Road? Did they demonize the Valley Main Road? One of their talk show hosts went as far as writing to the governor to remove the medians from the Valley Main Road. They demonize the airport road. They demonize the airport development. Or shouldn't be on the backs of the people of Angola. This was a significant campaign item. They demonize the Blowing Point Ferry Terminal, that beautiful facility that every visitor to this country have it featured on their statuses. Now, the Lansambole Cultural Center, they demonize that even after coming to office. Shelley Rogers Webster, it seemed as if that was one of her pet peeves, the Lansambole Cultural Center. How dare you develop such a beautiful facility, the best in the Caribbean? How dare you do that? So identity digital is just part of the way the Angola United Front campaigns in politics. They make everything look bad. One of the best chairman of the summer festival we've ever had, brought so much to the Anguilla Summer Festival, was Ivan Connor. They demonized him. And look at the 2024 Anguilla Summer Festival and compare it to the 2025 Anguilla Summer Festival. Look at the prize giving and so forth, the vehicles and all that stuff, right? The scholarships for the Miss Teenage. 2 vehicles, 3 vehicles for the summer festival. One went to the Calypso King, one went to the Miss Anguilla, and then one went to a deserving young man who won it in a raffle. Now, and that is the modus operandi of the Anguilla United Front. So when I saw, I really and truly wanted to go to this conference. I really wanted to go. And Merrick, we know that based on the numbers that we've seen in the budget, that the previous manager for the .ai have not remitted tens of thousands, maybe millions to the coffers of the government of Angola. But yet you still have the United Front naysayers out there saying that we disenfranchise a local. We did a local badly by taking it from this local, give it to Identity Digital. Meanwhile, the government of Angola is saying, great job, Identity Digital. Continue to do what you're doing for us. And these are the things that are troubling to me. And I don't understand how they're not troubling to people who go out and vote for this Anguilla United Front. But then I say to myself, MAGA don't change. MAGA don't change. There are people who believe that Trump is the best president that America has ever had. People who believe that he's greater than Abraham Lincoln. He's greater than George Washington. He's greater than Barack Obama. He's greater than Bill Clinton. People who believe that he's one of the greatest things that ever come. As a matter of fact, there's a culture that is setting up right now that worships Donald Trump. This is a fact. Worship Donald Trump as the savior. So when I see that, I come to the stark realization that in Anguilla, supporting MAGA, aka the Anguilla United Front, is no different than supporting Donald Trump in the United States of America. The peace president, the president of NOAA's, similar. You remember the Anguilla United Front had so much to say about the contract for Identity Digital. They had so much to say about the bulk fuel levy. They had so much to say about the charges at the hospital and the increase at the port, the port fees and so forth. They had so much to say about these things. But it has not even made the legislative agenda. You understand what I'm saying?
But
They
you
have
know
not
what?
even, since coming to office, they have not even said or mentioned anything to do with those things.
That's
Make
right.
it make
But
sense. Make it make sense.
But you know what they haven't talked about? They talk about wanting to put the Department of Health Services back as a health authority, but they haven't talked about the unaccounted millions that keep showing up at all the audits. They never talk about that.
Because they want that to be returned and they want that to continue. That's why, Dr. Webster. Why else? Why we haven't been seen in?
That's the only thing I
Why
could
else?
think.
I wouldn't be
Exactly.
surprised if they didn't bring in DCK. You know what I mean? I would not be
Exactly.
surprised. This
That-
Anguilla United Front does not change. I have never heard of a leopard changing its spots. I have never heard of a zebra without stripes. I have never heard of a lion without a mane. And I have never heard of a United Front without irresponsibility and all sorts of shady, questionable decisions.
Yeah, so I had the honor of being invited to a couple of the events of the global summit on the .ai, and met many of the prominent players in the world in terms of not only the marketing and management of technology and .ai and how it's sold and how it has reached over I think it was 1 million domain name registrations that hit that last year. But it was so good to meet these persons, and they said there were over 40 something persons that were represented there from different companies throughout the world. It was good to see the confidence that they had in this in Identity Digital, and that this .ai domain name registration, that it would be maintained and they had that confidence. They had they fell in love with Anguilla. They were amazed that such a small island, who some years back was in the doldrums, now had the beautiful ferry terminal that they could come into, that had the beautiful airport terminal. I mean, some of them told me that they have traveled the world and to see that beautiful edifice that is set up and that can be expanded into as you have need for it, and the efficiency of it, the design of it. This was local design, wasn't it, Minister? This was done by Anguillians, and then to tell
Designed
us
by
that,
Ang Williams.
yes,
Designed by Ang Williams. I want to go back a little bit though, Dr. Webster. Before we came to office, maybe a year or two before we came to office, they had a consultant who did a design for the Bloemfontein Ferry Terminal, and they placed it on the governor's Facebook page. And one of the members of staff of the Ministry of Infrastructure, Joe Bond, forgot his last name, it's slipping me. Joe Bond. Joe Bond Gums, he made a strong post about that. And I really appreciate that he stood up and stand out against what was happening to Anguilla. And he challenged them on that box that they were putting down in Blowing Point, right? And then it went away, and then eventually nothing happened. When we came to office, nothing was happening. All of the funds was being siphoned off to education because the schools needed the funding to complete. And even if all of the money went to the schools, Dr. Webster, we know there wouldn't have been enough to even touch the surface, because
that's right.
ultimately you had to be able to provide, based on the Ann Kentish Rogers request, almost $40 million to get that school open and get back on some sort of normalcy for the children of Anguilla. In
And
that time frame,
that still didn't fund the science block or the TVET,
TVET,
which were
all the
all part
TVET.
of the package that they were siphoning off the money and couldn't do it because, who knows? And then they got upset when we got funding, separate funding for the Blowing Point Ferry Terminal, because remember what they said, that should have gone into the high school also.
Yes.
And why
Yes.
stay on that tent? I mean, I sorry I get thought, but it just, it irritates me. And
No, I
it
jump in at
irritates
any
me.
time, because these
Yes.
things are troubling.
Yes.
Even as it relates to the minimum wage. Now, I want Ken to come in here, right? Even as it relates to the minimum wage, because Anguilla have one of the highest minimum wages in the entire Caribbean. Bar none. We have one of the highest minimum wage in the Caribbean. As a matter of fact, when I went to tourism conferences, other ministers for other territories were telling me, hey, you're putting a lot of pressure on us. Whether it was St. Lucia, whether it was Antigua, whether it was Jamaica, whether it was Trinidad, all of them were saying Anguilla. Barbados, all of them were saying that Anguilla is putting a lot of pressure on them based on the things that we are doing. In the United Front say, oh, the minimum wage isn't enough, it should be more. But they have been novice. They have been novice. And the very same committee that Ken Hodge put together to ensure that we have pension and dignity for our seniors, all those persons who slave in the hospitality sector for decades, and all those electricians and plumbers and custodians, right, can go home with some dignity, with a pension, and don't have to be out trying to cut somebody's grass at 97 to survive and choose between keeping the lights on and food on their plate, right? They dismantle it. It wasn't a priority for them. And tell me how this is putting people first. How do we get fooled so easily? I don't understand it. Make it make sense.
Hayden, sometimes you just have to shake your head, huh? Because just today I was reading on social media about Montserrat, where Montserrat, they have this new minimum wage. And according to the Minister of Labor, Deputy Premier Veronica Darcet Hector, she said the new minimum wage, the wage floor of $12.50 is not designed to punish anyone, but to ensure that working people are protected and are given fair wages for fair work. That's over in Montserrat, And in Anguilla, it bothers me that with the increasing cost of living, that they are paying lip service to this important area of social development, right? the minimum wage to me is the cushion that is required at this point in time to try at least to provide the minimum ability for people to survive. You know, I was in a shop recently, supermarket, and I saw this family shopping, you know, and they were taking up items and putting them back and taking up and putting them back. And they finally got to the counter. And I was observing because I didn't see anything in that car that you could consider as extravagant, or, you know, sometimes people pick up expensive stuff that they really don't need, but, you know. And they put that stuff on the counter. And I could see the trepidation in the lady's face. And when the cashier gave them the price, I see them digging through the bag, looking for money that had got in the card, pulling out coins here and there, and they had to put back stuff, you know? And this is the reality of the harsh economic times that we are living in right now in Angola. And one may try to blame what's happening with the current geopolitical issue, but I'm saying this started long before that war in Iran. That started from the time that the government dismantled the GST. Because I spoke to business owners, and they said bluntly to me, the government has added 2 new taxes on top of their operating heads with the business, and they could not claim back this money, so they had to pass it on to the consumer, right? And this has caused the cost of living in Angola to go sky high. And I'm really, really concerned that even with the minimum wage, that by now, a year and months gone, we should have transitioned to a living wage. Because we always said from the outset, the minimum wage was always a beginning, you know? And again, with the issue of the pension, and I want to keep stressing this, because one of the roles of a government is to put in place the protection, social protection measures for its people. And we talk about the dignity of our people. Anguillians are known to be proud, resilient people. Anguillians shouldn't, at the age of 50, 60, be already begging and having to run to government to beg for some money to fly a loved one overseas, and then they have to have somebody examine their bank accounts and to see how much land they have. You know, it becomes a demeaning process. We talk about dignity and respect. If persons had that pension, at least it may not cover everything, but at least you know that it is something that you can add with your Social Security benefits that can at least ensure a better standard of living. You know, so these things, again, I got to keep stressing them, because at the end of the day, we can talk about how many millions the AI make, how many this and that make, but at the end of the day, if you have your people suffering like this, what is the price of progress? Are we really, really putting our people first?
There's a couple more topics I want to touch, and I think we have a dead hard stop at 9:30, and but Dr. Webster, before I get to you, I just wanted to highlight something, because both of us, I think all 3 of you touch on the different things the Honorable Premier would have said, especially as it relates to the relief package. And I think he didn't touch on when she spoke about it. She spoke in the House of Assembly that certain revenue heads weren't performing well, which is why the relief package could not be for an extended time. But in the press conference following that, the following week, the Honorable Premier was able to say that, you know, revenue is now doing so well that she forecast by the end of the year, we might not have to use any of the $73 million that was supposed to come from the reserves. Again, I'm afraid to take it because as it was shown in the Honorable House of Assembly, things that are said by in the press conference can be taken as fact, and we can't take them as a word for anything that is said in the press conference. But I want to throw that out there. But Dr. Webster, to you, while we're on the topic of things that are not happening in Anguilla, because there's a lot of that right now, and there's a lot of talk about measuring twice and cutting once. At this point in time, they don't even have a measuring tape. They're measuring with them fingers. You know, you put your fingers on something, then when you move it to that's how they're measuring right now. They're just putting your fingers on stuff and then putting it on. That's why they can't get nothing cut because they're not measuring with a measuring tape. But when we look at foreign indirect investment to the foreign direct investment to the island, a year in plus that this administration is now in power. And to me, that's a topic that's dormant, other than beach enclave that started under our administration, under your ministry. It's like that is the dead ear. It's nothing happening there. As a former minister of economic development, how are you seeing this out? Is it bothersome to you? Are you scared? And while on it, even the social component of Beach and Cliff, have you heard anything about it? Has anything been discussed in the public when it comes to that? Go ahead, Doc.
Right. I mean, yeah. So you know what is concerning is that we came through COVID and out of COVID and were able to come up with several MOUs and projects that were, investors had this confidence in Anguilla that we built the Blowing Point Ferry Terminal. We built the airport terminal. We were going to expand the runway. There would be bigger planes with more passengers coming in. There'll be more heads and beds. That means businesses can get started because you'd have a more greater influx of people. That there was so much confidence that was going, and we said that every MOU that we signed had to have a social component to the tune of millions of dollars. And we were able to get those signed and get enactment on those, including the 5 million from DOT to do the Lanson Bowl Cultural Center, the 2 million committed by the Richard Schultz for the to get the MRI, to get supplies for the hospital, to help with the old airport terminal when it was when American Airlines was going to come in to do the school feeding program, to help out with Project Inspire to provide computers, laptops for teachers and students throughout all the primary schools, to WISE and to PRU. I mean, these were things that we felt was necessary. If you come into Anguilla to invest, you have to help invest in the people of Anguilla and to develop the people also. And we made that happen. Now, investors are running like they're jumping off the Titanic to get out of Anguilla, or to basically put their projects on hold because they don't have any confidence in this administration. They don't know what's going to happen. They don't see that, Anguilla, when it was running at this, GDP of over 8.2. They don't see that happening because now the projections have been turned down so far. It was supposed to be at 4, and then it's down to 3, and now they're projecting it maybe in the low 2s, in terms of economic growth projected. And that's not because of what's happening on the global scene. That is what happened when this administration decided to pause, reassess, and reprioritize, because they basically stopped most of the government infrastructure projects that were already funded and that could have helped to put money into the economy. But they also, with the change in the goods and service tax, or the goods tax and the general services tax, that basically added another component of operational costs to businesses, including the hospitality industry, because every hotelier that you talk to are saying, and the restaurants, of course, because now we see that long-term restaurants, some of them are now deciding to shutter. And some of them was saying that it was the GST before that would cause them to close down. And with this, they stayed around. They were able to survive and then flourish. There were restaurants that complained about the GST that was implemented on the 1st of July 2022, that a year later and 2 years later were saying it was the best thing that happened because their businesses had grown, that they could open one more or even two more branches of their restaurants, correct? So we know that that wasn't the problem. Now that the goods tax and the general services taxes come in, you see restaurants that have been there for over 40 years are now saying they have to close their doors, and others have had to scale back. And hotels are saying that because of the way the goods tax and the GST, the general services tax, now has increased their cost of doing business, that they too, their businesses cannot expand like they had planned to. And so it's that lack of investor confidence that has caused the Minister for Economic Development is basically now concentrating on other things. He's concentrating on his dance moves in Nigeria. He's concentrating on becoming a resident of St. Kitts Nevis, and where he's representing them and hanging out with them more. He's concentrating more on the agriculture, which is not happening because he basically has decided that they want to go and plant, at the place where the track could have been started. So tell me, is that progress? Or is that just basically trying to put his thumb in the eye of the previous administration to say that he can do it because he now has the power to do it? Just like the Minister of Infrastructure decided that he would, try to stick his thumb in the eye of the people of Island Harbor by stopping the basketball court from being built, the building. And so investors, I mean, think about the Savannah Bay Development Project. They have 214 acres of land. They were going to develop two peninsula hotels, a marina, and residences, and develop that area on the east, which is so much needed on the east. The Minister of Economic Development basically picked a fight with me, picked a fight with them, because he went and said he couldn't get in touch with them. When every time I picked up the phone and called them, they would answer. When I gave him the phone number to get in touch with them, he didn't make the calls. And then finally got in touch with them. And only because they were going to develop as their social project the boardwalk in Island Harbor, they've decided not to work with those investors. I mean, these are the things, this is the type of spitefulness and vindictiveness that this AUF administration has continued to display and to show, and it is hampering Anguilla's progress. Now, Minister Hart just said, what is the price of progress? The price of progress is that the people of Anguilla had confidence. They could then go out and invest more, and they know they had more discretionary funds. They know that they had a minimum wage, which was the floor that they could work with. Because there's the lack of progress with this AUF administration, people are now realizing that they don't have the confidence to do the things that they had planned to do. Businesses they wanted to get started, they can't do. Sending their children off to college, they can't take that risk because they don't know if they will be able to have them finish. And they don't know if this administration is going to only be $73 million in deficit, or if it's going to be $200 million in deficit. Because when we left them almost $300 million in reserves, we don't know how much they have taken out of that already. Because when I asked the leader of government business, the Minister of Finance, to give us a report on what is happening there, and if any obligations that they have made towards those monies going forward, I still don't have that report. And it's not just because I want to see it, because, I want to see it. It's because the people of Anguilla have been demanding it from day one of this administration, saying that every previous administration has given a state of the nation when they come in, the state of the finances of the nation, the proposals for the nation, how it would affect the people's lives themselves. And this administration would rather, say that they want to get a house in London, spend that type of money in London, and not want to do anything for the people of Anguilla. That we have said, and we continue to say, that the relief package that they came up with was inadequate. They could afford to do better, but they don't want to do better for the people who are in Anguilla. They'd rather take care of the people outside of Anguilla who probably came in to vote for them to get them to where they are. And these are the things that are concerning to me, that we have to make sure to develop our country first. Charity begins at home. Let's make that happen. And then you can look at other areas where you can expand. Now, I saw on the agenda, the legislative agenda, things about the Eastern Caribbean Asset Management Corporation. But in the explanation, they basically put one line as to what that meant. And you know what the ECAMC stands for. It's basically they are to take properties, residential and commercial, owned by Anguillians that had the misfortune of not being able to maintain and service their loans. They became non-performing loans. Those were then taken over by the receiver and by the bank, the new bank, NCBA. And the plan is to pass those over to the ECAMC so that they can sell them off, essentially. Now, we don't know what the legislative proposals are that are coming for the ECAMC. It would be good to have an explanation. They talked about depositors' insurance for the banks. That's a good idea because you want to have your monies protected. That is explained. They talk about that there's going to be some small change to the Banking Act of 2015. We again don't know what that's going to entail, but we do know that that Banking Act, which led to protests in the street and also to where the door of the House of Assembly was knocked down, that gave the ECCB so much power and control. We do know these things. What is there coming that the Minister for Finance, who is the member on the Monetary Council, is not telling us and didn't want to say when she made her presentation in the House of Assembly on the 14th of April? These are concerns that I have, and I really think that we need answers. We demand answers. We should get answers. And if we can't get answers, we have to do what is necessary to make sure that we know what's going on in the country. Because when things happen badly due to policies, not only the government falters or is affected, the people of Anguilla and Anguilla itself is affected. And we have to make sure that we maintain that confidence so that Anguilla can be developed, so that the social programs in each MOU, that they are held to account and that they come. I too want to see what the the $1 million proposed by Beach Enclave as their social contribution. I want to see what it entails. And we know that there's so many needs. There's scholarships that are needed. So these are supposed to social projects that include health, education, sports, and culture. Scholarships. You know that we were looking to get monies for scholarships so that we can send persons off so that they can train and bring back those skills to Anguilla. I would like to see more transparency and accountability happening. And I'd like to know what the Minister of Economic Development is doing, because so far, as I said, I made one difference in Anguilla.
Well, he's put Anguilla on the Nigerian.
But he went there with the St. Kitts Nevis delegation, so I don't know how much he put Anguilla on the stage. But I know that
online asking about as it relates to the Public Accounts Committee and why there haven't been a lot of action seen from the Public Accounts Committee. So I'd just like to say publicly, it comes down to training. The members of I'm a part of the committee. Single Island Wide member, Mr. Brian, and the member for Valley, Cardiel Richardson, are all members of the Public Accounts Committee. A new brand committee, and usually training is always required, so you don't go in blindly. So there has been a lot of issues as to get a training done. A decision was made that the members for the Public Accounts Committee will be going off to the UK to get that proper training so we can function properly. Because without the training, we can go into these investigations, but without the training, we wouldn't. Too. So we are scheduled to travel in June to the UK for this training. So
well, you hope that the opposition, Merrick, you're hopeful that the opposition members are included, because based on that voice note that came inadvertently from the speaker in our chat, you never know what's gonna happen. So you never know.
Well, you know me, Hayden. I deal with hope. Well,
I saw an interview today with one of the greatest presidents, and definitely the greatest president of our lifetime, Barack Obama. They asked him if he's still hopeful. He said yes, he's still hopeful. So yes, I can understand why you're still hopeful.
I am always hopeful. The house will always be the house. The rules and everything and procedures, they don't change.
And I think when you mentioned when you mentioned America, I think that really and truly, when I had my radio program, I try to educate as much as possible about the rules, the procedure, not only for the House, but on the Constitution and so forth, because sometimes you read the comments. I read comments sometimes, and people just don't understand the rules. They don't understand the Constitution. They don't understand any of these things, and people just formulate their opinions based on what somebody tell them. Somebody who seem as if they're qualified, learned, and educated. You know what I mean? But you can't change the words. You can't change the verbiage. You know what I mean? So those things can be manipulated by lawyers. But the reality is that the facts are the facts, and the Constitution is the Constitution. The rules of procedure are the rules of the procedure.
That's 100% correct. And that is why when I stand my ground in the House, I stand my ground because I always follow the rules in the House. But Hayden, while I have you here, stay focused. Anglic.
Yes.
There's so many angles to
listen.
Question out, so go right ahead.
We can
because we have 9 minutes. We have 9 minutes. I'm gonna give you. Wait, hold up. I'm gonna give you.
Give me 1 minute, and Dr.
minutes.
Webster the rest, because Dr. Webster can speak about Anglic as well too. Because we have a minister that, like I said, is totally incompetent. The decisions that have been made, and do you know that right now, as we speak, there are hotels that have been asked to come off grid. No, the reality is that when we were in office, we were able to develop the economy to such a point that we had reached our full capacity in terms of Anglic. And the idea was that we would have diversified offerings. To ensure that we have enough carrying capacity for the entire population, including the hotel component. And guess what? They did everything to block that. And here we are. We are out of office almost 2 years, and they have not progressed anything. And it also comes down to the total incompetence of the present Minister of Government. And when people say, hey, I am so disappointed in Jose, I say, why? Well, I know he's an educated guy, he speaks well. So I think I'm very disappointed. I say, why are you disappointed? Tell real life. He went off to university on an island scholar. He got his master's, he came back, member of parliament. He ran for elected office in 2000, opposition, and there he served in the benches of the Minister of Government. Where is his real life experience to be able to manage a ministry? And that's one of the reasons why we have BCQS. That is the reason why Jose Van de Poel to bring us 3,300% return, which would have amounted to what? Over $31 billion in revenue to Anguilla. This is why Joseph Vanderpool said in the Caracas by experience and the competency to be able to manage. And that is why I believe they say, you know what, this guy needs help. Let us bring in this big company, BCQSL, manage the ministry. But if they want somebody to manage the ministry, I'll do it for free. I'll do it complimentary. I'll help Joseph Vanderpool complimentary because in helping Joseph Vanderpool, we'll be helping Anguilla.
Exactly. Exactly. And
You
he
can go
needs
ahead,
help.
Doc.
a few, well, I think most of those ministers need help because we can tell nothing is happening, and there was
Mistake,
the
sorry,
blueprints.
Dr. Sorry, you
Yes.
made a big mistake. You said most, all. All. Which one don't need? She's in charge of education, and every so often we see some sort of the end. There'll be
Yep,
sick outs, there'll be sit outs, there'll be strikes, there'll be letters, there'll be Shelley Rogers Webster and members of the opposition on radio blasting her. You know how you know this? Okay.
because
History
she
don't
did.
lie. The record
Because
don't
she
lie.
did. And she said it all comes down to the minister hammer. Right? So yeah, but let's go back to Anglic because this is one of those travesties that has happened with Anglic. Anglic. Well, first when they were trying to get rid of sell the 40% shares that government has in Anglic. The government of Anguilla at the time, the AUF administration, wanted to sell that for $24 million to cover debt. Now you can imagine that $24 million would have been gone poof, right? Because if you're paying debt with it, it doesn't exist anymore, and you've lost 40% of the entity that essentially is a national, one of those national entities that you have to preserve. Because if Anglec was privatized, in terms of that government didn't own 79% of the shares, that the cost of electricity would have gone through the roof. In fact, the former CEO told us that when he raised the fuel surcharge to 70 cents, he told us that it should have been $1.02. And now we are hearing that they're saying that if you really apply the real cost of fuel and operations for Anglec, that it should actually be over $1.08 instead of the 88 cents that they put it up to.
And the
And thank
88
God,
cents is extremely high, you know. Extremely high.
exactly. Can you imagine paying 88 cents on top of the base charge, and that people on minimum wage, or some even getting less than that, have to be paying for electricity? So now they have to ration, getting the lights on, and whether they're going to have the fridge on at what time, and what it's just unconscionable that in the 21st century that Anguillians have to be doing this. And there was an alternative. There were investors, 12, 13 different investors or developers that approached us and said, we know that you want to transition to full renewable energy. We are willing to fund these projects, build the farms, provide electricity, and do it through a power purchase agreement. Which
And
in 2000,
nasty maggots out there try to claim that you were a shareholder in the businesses.
well, they
You know,
keep
that's
saying
the
that,
way they
yes,
operate. They're
that's right.
nasty. They're
But
nasty and despicable set of people.
you're right. In 2008, when the current chairman of Anglec, Mr. David Carty, had left to go and run a commission on energy, PPA was the good word at that time. It was like it's what .ai is now. It's like the be all and end all. The PPA he
Yes,
wrote was essential to
yes.
provide renewable energy for Anguilla, whether it was wind and solar, solar alone. It was the big thing then. Now, and Castalia came in 2013, wrote a report and said, yes, a power purchase agreement is the way to go because solar panels, the cost is decreasing. You can get investor, developer to come in and do it. They would be responsible for maintenance. They're responsible for the insurance of it. They're responsible for repairing it if it gets damaged. Just think about now if Anglic was to do this on their own, because there's no plan. We know there's no plan for Anglic to do renewable energy because it's been so long that they've talked about it and hasn't happened. And if they said they didn't need government to guarantee any loans they got or to even give a blessing, then they could have started already if they wanted to. But think if Anglic had even a 12 megawatt field and there was another hurricane that came, God forbid, and it took out that farm, what would happen? Who would have to make sure that that farm was now funded to be replaced? It's either going to be Anglic
Out of
or
government of Angola.
the government of Anguilla. And we know that, like happened with Hurricane Irma, that the government of Anguilla, the UK government, and the Canadian government had to help to restore Anglic after Hurricane Irma. So
But not
these
only
are
that, not only that, Dr. Webster, the 1 megawatt plant that they had down in the corridor was totally decimated,
that's right.
never to return.
Never to return. And just think if it's 1 megawatt they couldn't replace, what would happen if they had one that is 12? That is not going to make a significant dent in the cost of electricity for the people of Anguilla because you're still going to have to run those Wärtsilä engines at full capacity. Whereas if you they had progressed towards renewable energy with 100% transition, then you still would have to have backup, but you would have those generators working at small baseline, which would bring down the cost. In fact, I've seen a proposal just now, recently, written by some consultants that shows that we can get solar energy in Anguilla and it would be 19 cents US per kilowatt hour. 19 cents compared to $1.35 EC as the base and then 88 cents as the fuel surcharge per kilowatt hour. If you think about 19 cents, so that's what, 52 cents EC versus
A
135
quarter of the
plus
cost.
88. A quarter of the cost, significantly a quarter of the cost that it is now. You would have that. And
And then
those,
the liability will not be our liability.
that's
It will not
correct.
be Anglic's liability, and it will not be government of Angola's
That's
taxpayers' liability.
exactly. It
Where's the
would be our,
wisdom? Where's the
there is,
wisdom?
there's no vision. There is no vision.
You
And
know what
so
the Bible
certainly,
says?
yep, and
Where there's a lack of
that's
vision, the
why we're
people perish.
perishing. That's why we are perishing now.
Gentlemen, I know if I let you guys go on, we might be here till 11 p.m. So
The people are
this
asking for that, Merrick. The people are asking for that. They call me every day. They call me,
yeah,
they meet me, they tell me, we want to hear from you guys because you're telling the truth and you're opening up our eyes to what the wool was pulled over our eyes during the campaign. And since then, we have been forgotten by the current administration. That's what they're telling me every time and every day.
no, I hear it all the time as well. But when the producer says we have come to the end, we have to listen to the producer. We can't be naughty. We can't be too naughty.
You the
Um,
speaker, you the speaker now?
yes, time limit is imposed. But no, tonight's show was riveting. There was a lot of passion coming from you gentlemen. So we're gonna close off. We're gonna go in the order of Mr. Hodge, you, Mr. Hughes, then I'll give my closing remarks, and Dr. Webster, you will close out the program. So,
Thank you.
Mr. Hodge.
Merrick, where there is no vision, the people perish. Angola's in trouble. And I think the show tonight highlighted that, and I think the people of Angola need to open their eyes and see what's happening and begin to speak out. This wall of silence in Angola needs to stop. People need to speak out what's happening in Angola. Cost of living is going through the roof, and people need to speak up, open up, and let us get this country moving. Thank you. It was a pleasure being on the program tonight. Thanks to Dr. Webster, Hayden, and Merrick. Pleasure as always.
Thank you.
Well, thank you very much, Merrick, for having me on the show tonight. I was chomping at a bit after such a beautiful show last week and the week before. It was really, really good show. This is an amazing show, bringing the facts to the people, and it's really good to be here having this conversation with the people. So thank you very much for having me, and we'll see you next week for sure.
Yes, it was actually my pleasure to host this program tonight. You know, listening to you gentlemen brings such passion. I think that's what missing now from the administration in Anguilla, the passion. Because sitting in the rooms with you gentlemen, I know it was a labor of love. It wasn't nothing about the accolades or being the honorable or the minister. You know, it was just about pure passion and love for this country. And I think everyone who's listening tonight would get a feel, a real true feel, because the narratives can say who loves Anguilla and who's Anguillian enough and who really loves the people. But the proof is in the pudding. You have to taste it. That's the only way you're going to know. And I think they've tasted the pudding from APM. They are now tasting this pudding and they from AUF. And it's very, very bitter. So with that, for me, good night, everyone. And Dr. Webster, you close us out.
Thank you, Merrick, and thank you for being able to moderate these the giants that up there on the screen over you, because you held well as a referee, make sure everybody got they say, and this is your calling, and you certainly have grown into this role, as a parliamentarian, as a legislator, and as a representative of the people. The people know, but you've always done it. You've been a coach, you've been a player, so you know teamwork, you know how to manage people, you know how to get the job done, and that's what you want to do. And if they were to, untie your hands and take their foot off your neck, like this current administration is doing, you'd be able to do great things, not only for the people of District 5, but for Anguilla. That is your passion. I see it, and I see your role in this. Well, you're a better diplomat than me, because I get the hackles on my head tend to rise when I see the injustices that are happening in Anguilla right now. I want to thank Mr. Hughes for bringing the facts to the people, and he can back it up with the history to show that you know if you don't know your history, then you're apt to repeat it. And too many times, Anguilla has fallen by the wayside because we have elected persons who have beautiful, glossy manuals and manifestos and have never been able to deliver. They couldn't deliver. They delivered 1 out of 15, plans of the manifesto 2015 to 2020 and beyond. They delivered 2 pieces of legislation out of 43 items that they brought to the House last year, saying this was their agenda. I wait to see how much they're going to bring this time for this legislative agenda. It's just disheartening that it happens, and then the people get neglected, the people suffer, and then it takes another administration to come in to rescue Anguilla, to give the people hope, to give them that sense that they can benefit from this country that our forefathers left to us to guard and to keep sacred. And this is where we are right now. Mr. Hodge, you bring such an understanding of where things are in terms of public service. You committed your whole life to public service. And that is, when I looked at your dad's eulogy, and I said, I see where Minister Hodge got his ability to work without any type of compensation, to just give of his all. and without expecting anything in return, because his dad set that tone, his mom set the tone. I know, so these are the things, these are the people that came into government in 2020, compassionate, caring, competent. And I say competent again because we lack that competence right now in the current administration. They can't get anything done because they don't know how to get it done. And so they bring in consultants who just basically, rape the monies out of the treasury, because they know they have a government that don't know what to expect. So they come in and they don't do a good job. Nothing gets done. And then, the next thing you know is we are basically going backward. So I'm saying it's time that the people of Angola wake up and demand from your government what you want to see done that should be done. You deserve better. Make better happen. That's what people do. And when they're frustrated, when things are not going the way they should, you elected the government. You tell the government, hold them to task, make them accountable, tell them they have to do what needs to be done to make this country better than it was when they got it. And so far, they have failed miserably, 120% in that regard. And to the producers of this show and to ones that allow it to happen, Gaff from Titanium Audiovisuals, who make sure that this gets sent out to the people, not only in Anguilla, but throughout the world. People are watching. Anguilla has always been that shining example for the world. During COVID, we were ranked number 7th in the world. In the world of 180 something countries, we were ranked number 7th in management of COVID. We in the Eastern Caribbean Currency Union, out of the 8 countries, most of them independent countries that have been around for a while and managed their own affairs, Anguilla topped them, almost doubled them in terms of productivity. I mean, can you imagine that? A whole little island. And now we have spun so far backward that people are laughing at us. Wherever you go in the Caribbean or in the world, they're saying, what did the people of Anguilla do that, you had a country that was on such a trajectory, the angle of progress was so high, and this is where we are. So I'm saying, I want to thank everyone, the people of Anguilla, for listening, for watching, and for making informed decisions about where you want to be, where you want to go. Thank my colleagues, those who are on the program and those who are behind the scenes with us, who are there with us and who are still there for the people of Anguilla. And, Quincy Gomes-Marie, Deanne Kentish-Rogers, Jamie Hodge, Lennox Vanterpool, Atlin Vanterpool, Courtney Morton. I'm missing someone, but Gleneva Hodge. This is what happens, at this hour of the night. But we toil up into the wee hours of the morning, still thinking about what we can do to make sure that Anguilla is on the right track. And so again, thanks for this program. Thanks for all the programs we do to inform the people. I thank the people of Anguilla for having had the confidence in us to see what is possible when you have an Anguilla reimagined, when you have people who care. Again, wish you good night. May God bless you. May God continue to bless the people of Anguilla, and may God continue to bless Anguilla always. Thank you very much.
Good night.